Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to my video game reviews. In today's video, we shall be concluding the classic era of Kirby games with the 13th game in the franchise and the 6th mainline game in the series, Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, or as it's called in Japan, Hoshi no Kabi 64. In many ways, this game serves as an ending of many things. The classic or golden era of Kirby is just one. It is also the last in what is often called the Dark Matter Trilogy, which was a trio of games including Kirby's Dream Land 2 and Kirby's Dream Land 3, both of which I've reviewed, so check those out if you're interested in learning more, all of which were mainly directed by the mysterious Shinichi Shinamura, who has very little public information and would fade from the mortal world shortly after this game and after a little work on Kirby's Nightmare Dreamland. It would also be the last mainline game released for a home video game console until 11 years later in 2011 with the release of Kirby's Return to Dreamland, which I shall eventually review as it's one of my favorite Kirby games. Is there a reason for this massive gap? Does this game lack quality, or is it a hidden gem? Well, as always, let us start this review with the game's developmental history. Alright, so the development of this game from all accounts went fairly smooth, though Masahiro Sakurai, outside of voicing Deity, seems to have played no role, as he was kind of tired of the sequelization of the series. Originally, the game was to use the Nintendo 64 DD, which was a magnetic floppy disk-based peripheral for the system, made in collaboration with Alps Electronics. It was meant to revolutionize the system, allowing for expanded data storage and online gaming. Sadly, due to a number of factors including delays, the 64DD, or disk drive as some call it, was a commercial failure, leading to many games planned on utilizing it either being cancelled or reinterpreted for the GameCube. While it's never been confirmed, you can kind of tell that it did impact the game to some extent, as prototypes had you able to play as Kirby's friends throughout the game, with Ribbon being used to swap between Kirby, Waddle-Dee, Adeline, and King Dedede. The final game only had Dedede being able to play with in specific areas. The animal friends were also planned on appearing via Adeline's painting them, but this never got past the concept art stage. They are in the game in some way, but I'll get to that in the gameplay section. Also, there's a lot of cool ideas found in the concept art, including a shooting star level and Kirby riding a whale that was a reference to the original Kirby's Dream Land. Aside from the mysterious Shinichi Shinamura, other notable staff members included Jun Ishikawa and Hirokazu Ando as the sound composers, as well as this being the first game with Makiko Ohomoto as Kirby's voice, and she would return a lot. Anyway, at the end of the day, it would be released on March 24th, 2000 in Japan for the Nintendo 64. It would then be released in North America on June 26th, 2000, and lastly on June 22nd, 2001 in the EU and Australia. And it seems to have sold well, with 1.7 million units sold. But what about the game itself? Well, Let us start with the story and see if that's any good. Alright, so in a neat twist, this story does not open with Kirby or Popstar, but instead on the heart-shaped planet named Ripple Star, homeworld of the fairies, which are similar to the angel we saw in Kirby's Dream Land 3. I think they're meant to be the same race, where they guard a powerful crystal. All is peaceful until the malevolent entity known as dark matter attacks the planet, hoping to corrupt the world's powerful crystal for its own evil plans. Fearing this, the queen sends a young fairy named Ribbon to escape with the giant crystal to a safe space. Sadly, the little girl is pursued by a trio of dark matter orbs that were sent out by the main mass to get it. They have names in Japan. Those are Dark Rimuru, Dark Rimura, and Dark Rimuro. But given they don't have any real character, I won't really dwell on them as individuals further. I'll just call them dark matter because it's easier. They attack the girl, shattering the crystal into several crystal shards and sending the little girl falling down to Popstar. We then cut to Kirby, who is watching the shooting stars, which are, actually the crystal shards being spread throughout the local galaxy. The girl falls on top of him. Not only do both survive this re entry into the atmosphere and impact, but Kirby is not even particularly bothered by it, and after she explains the situation, he promises to help her reform the shards. From there, he and the little girl named Ribbon go through Dreamland in order to collect the shards. They encounter Waddle Dee, who becomes possessed by dark matter after coming upon a crystal shard, turning into Waddle Doo, which, makes me wonder if all Waddle Doos start off like that. But anyway, Kirby fights him, beating the dark matter out of him and getting another shard, as well as causing Waddle Dee to join him on the adventure. They come across the painter girl Adeline, who is possessed by dark matter after finding a shard, and paints enemies that Kirby has to beat before being freed from possession, and also joining Kirby on his quest. He then goes to Castle Deity and encounters the king, who takes a crystal shard and is possessed by dark matter, and then attacks Kirby before getting beaten up, and reluctantly joins the gang after a bit of hesitation. From here, the story sort of dies down a bit. Kirby and his allies travel through several planets, and while there are a few, neat cutscenes with Kirby in the game encountering the various environments, like the dry deserts of Rockstar, the oceans of Aquastar, the volcanoes of Neostar, the Icer Winter wasteland that is now Earth, Shiver Star. Eventually, the group arrive back in Ripple Star, where they confront Miracle Matter, the quote-unquote leader of Dark Matter. From there are two endings, depending on if the player collected all the crystal shards or not. If you don't bother, it turns out that the queen is still possessed and glares at Ribbon, clearly, indicating a bad ending. But if you do the right thing and get all the crystal shards, the big crystal is restored and shoots the queen with a laser beam, revealing the dark matter inside her. The remaining dark matter conglomerates into a new planet, Dark Star. Seeking to end the threat once and for all, Kirby and his allies go to it. He, alongside Ribbon, face Zero 2, the fallen angel-looking resurrection of Zero, though admittedly whether they are the same entity is a bit debated. After a tough fight, dark matter is eliminated for good. The Queen awards Kirby and the others with medals made out of crystal, and Kirby is kissed by Ribbon. Honestly, the story is pretty good. I've heard some say it's just a retread from Dreamland 3, and while there are shared elements, I think that's an oversimplification to say that it just retreads the original story. It develops the world more, and seeing a dark matter play a more active role gives the story more stakes. Though I have to admit that It is a bit front heavy, at least compared, you know, Pop Star to the other planets, but that's understandable given that that's where Kirby meets all his allies. Overall, it's a fun take that is perfectly made for what it is. Now let's go on to arguably the most important aspect of any game, the gameplay. Alright, so in terms of basic gameplay, Kirby moves using the D-pad. One of the few games to use that on the Nintendo 64. He inhales by pressing B and spitting out with another press of the button. He can crouch slash swallow enemies while, on the ground and pressing down on the D-pad, and a jump by pressing A. You can float slash fly around a bit, but here it's actually somewhat limited, likely due to the level design, but it's rarely a real issue. Underwater controls are as you expect in previous games, though you can use certain abilities. Overall, the base gameplay is pretty solid. A little more floaty than in Kirby Superstar, but sharper than in Kirby's Dream Land 3. Though he does move a little slow on the ground, but it's honestly not that bad. But it is with the copy abilities that we get into the meat of the gameplay. So much like the previous two games in the Dark Matter trilogy, the base copy abilities are few in number and relatively simple in function, all of which are returning except for one, but we'll get to that one last. Burn sees Kirby become a fireball and shoot forwards. Stone sees Kirby become a stone, but unlike previous games, is, not immobile and can walk around a bit slowly. Ice sees Kirby breathe ice, which can freeze enemies solid, then kick them away once frozen. Needle sees him become a spiky ball to impale enemies. It's immobile, but that is not much of an issue as it destroys pretty much any enemy that isn't itself invincible. Bomb sees him toss a bomb at enemies. It's fun to utilize as you can move while using it. Spark sees Kirby do a little yoga, which generates a field of electricity around him as a shield. Cutter is bizarre in that Kirby's body becomes a cutter, leaving Kirby just a slim piece of meat. Unlike other games, only one can be thrown at a time. The final ability is Ribbon's Crystal, which functions as the end game ability, much like, say, the Star Rod from Kirby's Adventure, which I've already reviewed if you're interested in learning more. Where it shoots crystals at 0-2. It doesn't have controls in normal gameplay, so it's hard to judge, but honestly, it's kind of fun. I like the visuals of the gun. But you don't just have the base abilities. No, you also have tons of combo abilities, which are handled a bit differently due to this game liking Animal Friends, as you play as only Kirby, with a few exceptions I'll get to in a bit. In order to combine them, you gotta press the L or R buttons to generate the star, which you can then throw at an enemy. This can be a bit annoying, especially if you miss or the enemy's a bit spry, but it's not common enough in my experience to be much of an issue. Though, admittedly, some levels can be worse with this than others. But speaking of the combo abilities, let's start with burning because I like fire. Also, just so we're clear, the exact order of how you combine things doesn't really matter. Like, for example, fire stone and stone fire are the same. As such, there will be less combos to talk about as we go further down the copy ability list. Combining burning with, well, itself burning, you get, much like other, double copy abilities, a more powerful Phoenix-like fireball. It lasts much longer and is more powerful, but it does leave a bit of loss of control at the ending once you get out of it, unlike base burning, and as a consequence, it can get a little dicey in certain situations. The Burn Stone combo has Kirby turn into a volcano, which can shoot magma balls at enemies. The direction can be altered with a directional pad in a 180-degree range. Burning slash ice has Kirby turn into a flaming ice cube, which defeats any enemy it hits. It's honestly, as you might expect, not really a good combo. It doesn't last very long and doesn't really help you get any crystal shards, so it's just kind of Meh, honestly. I don't know why you'd ever use it, except just to try it. The burn needle combo sees Kirby become a bow. While you can alter the height of the angle by holding B, the arrow will also kill any enemies as well as sticking onto the ground for a bit. It's honestly a bit fun, but it's also a little slow, which can get a little tedious at times. It's fine, but a bit slow for my taste, in all honesty. Burn Bomb sees Kirby summon three firework explosions. It's really fun to play and has a lot of good coverage. With a Burn Spark combo ability, Kirby rubs his head with a sort of, sheet that catches fire, and he runs at top speed, killing any who fall into him. It's fine, but it has a bit of a slow start. The Burner Cutter combo sees him pull out a massive flaming sword. I don't know, kind of like, the Emperor of Mankind, which he can then swing and fling at enemies. Moving on to Stone, the double Stone combo gives him the ability to turn into a massive rock form. Pretty slow and can defeat any foe that isn't invincible like a Gordo. Perhaps not very deep, but I did believe that it inspired the metal copy ability in Kirby's Squeak Squad, for better or for worse. It's honestly somewhat of a fun ability, but just not that deep, mechanically speaking. The Stone Ice combo sees him become a curling stone, which slides into enemies that he hits. Sadly, Kirby can't be controlled by the player and will bounce off walls, and that can get a little dangerous. The Stone and Needle combo sees him summon a giant drill that can launch forward at enemies. It's fun to use, and you do need it for one crystal shard in Shiver Star, but anyway, the Stone Bomb combo has Kirby utilize a stick of dynamite to defeat all enemies on screen via screen nuke. It's easily one of the most powerful abilities in the game, though oddly, Kirby can't get himself hurt if he doesn't put on his hard hat by passing down. I don't know why they did that, it seems like a very unusual choice. The Stone Spark combo has a meteor tied by an electric rope that honestly seems to do whatever the heck it wants. It kills whatever it touches and supposedly is meant to hone in on enemies, but I never see that. You needed to get one crystal shard in Rockstar. Last but not least, you got the Stone Cutter combo, which sees a stone cut into one of the six animal friends. Kine is immobile and acts much like the based stone into the games. Ku can fly for a short period of time. Nago can waddle slowly and jump up to three times at once. Choo Choo jumps fairly high to move but can't walk. There's Pitch. Kirby can, fly and arguably is the most mobile due to his speed and will also roll on the ground with impact. The last transformation is Rick the Hamster. He's arguably the most important one, which is ironic given he was one of the weaker animal friends, is that his wall climbing ability from Dreamland 3, which I didn't mention in that review as it wasn't really needed in that game, is required to get a Crystal Shard in Aqua Star Stage 3. So honestly, I hope you remember that, but it's honestly a rather fun game combo, honestly. Going on to ice, double ice combo sees Kirby become a massive snowball that crushes all. It's fun, but can be a bit hard to control. The ice needle combo ability sees Kirby become a literal snowflake with great range, but functions like the base needle form. The ice bomb combo sees him become an explosive snowman with a, very powerful explosion. The Ice Spark combo sees Kirby become a refrigerator that can summon food, which can both kill enemies and heal Kirby. The Ice Cutter ability sees Kirby gain a pair of skis slash, those sort of things used to go on ice ramps. And, he'll twirl when he jumps, and it's honestly pretty fun. Moving on to the double needle combo, he summons a ton of dastardly pointed objects, including a wasp stinger, a nail, a sharpened colored pencil, a compass, a cactus, a syringe, and a three-pronged fork. Interestingly, in the beta of this game, it had a fork that was two-pronged, and had a design that was a reference to the Spear of Longinus from Evangelion. I've never watched the anime, but that's kind of an interesting thing. It functions like a base needle, but with greater range. So yeah, the needle bomb combo has Kirby become a Gordo, which can move rather slowly and so isn't really all that useful, and will explode and release 8 spikes. It's a bit odd to use, but because you need it for one crystal shard, it's actually somewhat useful. The needle cutter combo sees Kirby become a massive, disturbing, Cthulhu esque bear trap maw. That just is horrifying. There is the Needle Spark combo ability that sees him become a lightning conductor and summon a bolt that fries enemies. Going to bomb, the double bomb combo sees Kirby release rockets that home in on enemies. Great and fun to use, especially against bosses. The bomb spark combo ability sees Kirby become a light bulb that can both kill enemies and light up dark areas. This is needed in one room in stage 4 of Rockstar to reveal a hint in order to get a crystal shard. The bomb cutter combo sees him toss explosive shurikens at enemies like a ninja. It's cool. Moving on to Spark. Double Spark sees Kirby do a meditation hand wave and generate an electric wave around him. The Spark cutter combo gives him a Darth Maul double-bladed lightsaber thing. I honestly don't think I have to explain why this is awesome, but it does have the weakness where you can't fly while using it. Then there is the last but not least double cutter ability, which sees Kirby toss an impressive spiky boomerang. Overall, there are 36 total abilities, not all of which are particularly good, but they're fun to experiment with. Now let's go to Kirby's allies. The first is Waddle Dee, who doesn't really help except for providing a vehicle in certain situations, which are kind of fun, whee, woohoo, that kind of thing, right? He will also occasionally open walls and ceilings, saving Kirby at the last moment. Adeline is also mostly a background character who will paint Maxim tomatoes and one-ups for Kirby, which can be very useful in certain situations. Far more substantive is Dee Dee, who Kirby will ride around on him, where he can use his hammer to destroy objects. It's fun, but only really happens twice, so it didn't really get fleshed out in all honesty. Ribbon just helps collect the shards that Kirby touches, but doesn't really play a role until the final boss, which is a shooter. But, that's to be expected. Final bosses usually are. Overall, the base game is interesting, even if some of the side characters were underutilized. In addition to the base game, there are 3 minigames slash sub-games, which can be played with either CPUs or up to 3 other players. And you can play as either Kirby, Waddle, Adeline, and DDD, but there's no gameplay differences between them, so it's all visual. And there are 4 difficulty levels of easy, medium, hard, and intense, each of which unlocked by beating the CPUs in the previous difficulty levels. First, there is 100-yard hop, where you will have to time the right jump to avoid obstacles. Pressing A causes him to go 2 spaces, while pressing B has him only hop 1 space. Obstacles can either slip up the player or get them stuck or sent back to the spot that they jump from. These obstacles include a random frog that hops down the track, small ponds of water, banana peels, pitfalls, flopping fish, which is an enemy we'll meet later, turtles, and several others, all of which increase in occurrence as the difficulty increases. It can be surprisingly hard, especially with other players. Then there is the bumper crop bump, where up to 4 players can try to capture as many falling fruits while dodging bombs. That cause you to drop all the fruit you've gathered. Increasingly, as more fruit are collected, the character will get slower. It can be a bit mindless at times, but it's still fun with other people. Last but not least, you got the checkerboard chase, which sees you and up to 3 other players, where you have to release shockwaves causing bricks to fall in a line. It can be fun, but at the intense difficulty, the CPU is obnoxious. Shocked that there was no boss rush initially available, but we'll get to that when we get to the completion requirements. These mini games can be fun, but you need friends to get the most out of it. I want to touch on the items here for a bit. I usually have stopped doing this after a certain point as it just becomes repetitive and there aren't really new items all that often. But here, I want to talk about it. Of course, you got the returning star blocks, a few food varieties like the Maxim tomato, which heals all health. Then you got cakes, ice cream bars, spare ribs, and a sandwich, which is a rice ball in the Japanese original. I'd also like to shout out how the Ice Spark combo, where it becomes a fridge, has its own unique food items, such as asparagus, cheese wedges, flan, milk cartons, hot dogs, steak, soda, and sashimi. But most important of the items are the crystal shards, the main collectibles of the game. There is three per each stage, with one in each boss, and I'll discuss how to get them, but given how common they are, I probably want to just say that I won't talk about how to get each and every one of them, just because that would get a little repetitive, and this video is already extremely long. Overall, the gameplay of this game is very solid and is a good evolution from the precedent set by Kirby's Dream Land 2 and 3. Now let's go into the presentation of the game and see how that is aged, starting with the first aspect people notice, the graphics. Alright, so this game is the first 3D entry in the series, though it'll probably be more accurate to call it 2.5D, as you are limited to a two-dimensional plane despite the 3D graphics. Now, 2.5 games often get a bad rap due to a lot of them, especially in the PS2/PSP era, were rather ugly looking. Examples include Castlevania Dracula X Chronicles. But Kirby, I think, avoids this by having all the characters having a very simple, iconic designs that honestly still look good even today. Each of the worlds you explore has a distinct and great aesthetic. The first world, Popstar, is your typical grassy region and has some deep forests, but the impressive Deity Castle serves as a unique setting for a stage. We go into the castle and explore the interior and exterior. Rockstar is an ancient desert planet, mostly barren of plant life outside of some oases that you encounter. It does seem to have an ancient past with many ruins of lost civilizations, a beautiful cave level filled with the fossils of great beasts and corals from ages past, and ends in a large pyramid filled with strange technology that still works long after their creators died. Then there is Aquastar, which is the water world that, despite its appearance, does actually have a few patches of land, such as some tropical islands and deep wooded areas, as well as caves. But yeah, a lot of it's underwater with currents and sea life. Neostar is a strange planet, seemingly combining aspects of a tropical primordial forest filled with dinosaurs, at plateaus that in one case spell out Kirby's name, and Mount Doom type volcanic regions. It's really varied. Then we got Shiver Star, which is evident by the moon and continent shapes, a post apocalyptic nuclear winter frozen over Earth. This is further enhanced by how Kirby will go through several generalized snowy hills and then explore abandoned shopping malls and an underground factory with some strange critters in like tanks. It's kind of telling that even after we're gone, our consumerism still exists. It also makes me wonder how Adeline's still around. She's human. Sadly, it seems global warming and not cooling is what's going to turn us in. But anyway, it also has some of the most annoying shards to collect. The second to last level, Ripple Star, is filled with many enemy ambushes and sees Kirby go through various colorful regions, including a sort of floral walkway. Then there's like this creepy catacombs, which is unusual and seems to predate dark matter, as well as going through several buildings. It's neat and surprisingly easy to get all the shards in, unlike the last two planets. The last level, Dark Star, is well outside of the final boss. Just a short, black, hexagon-filled hallway. A bit creepy, with only a single type of enemy that we'll talk about later. And with the blood red background, it can be a little intimidating. Other interesting visual details is how each copy ability has a distinct logo. In the Japanese original, these are kanji, and frankly, it was a good idea to change it, as these have a lot more universal understandings. They also went to the effort to give a unique visual appearance to each of the individual difficulty levels of each of the minigames. The most notable one is the insane difficulty of Bumper Crop Bump, where gems are released from a rainbow instead of, apples being released from a tree. Overall, the graphics of this game really hold up. Unlike other Nintendo 64 games, it's thanks to the specific design choices. Anyway, now let's go on to the second half of the presentation, the music, and see how that is aged, whether it's still good or it's gone sour. Alright, so starting off the bat, the intro theme is really good and has a sort of twinkling star sort of vibe that roars into crescendo as dark matter attacks the planet. The various menu themes are also fine for what they are, but not really noticeable. The game has remixes of several classic themes like a gourmet race, the victory dance theme, butter building, and the animal friends all are come back, even if they're not in the game themselves, and honestly, they all sound perfectly fine. Notable new music include the invincibility theme, which has a notable, tone. The music when you encounter Waddle Dee, Adeline, as well as those in Popstar, all sound really fantastic. The generic mini boss theme is also fine to get you pumped up to beat someone up, with its very disco vibe, as is the generic boss battle theme, which is even more intense. And, not really fitting as the challenge in the game, but I still love the music. It's really fun to listen to. Going to the Rockstar, despite its name, I actually was fairly unimpressed by the map music in this level, as it was just a sort of subdued, generic Arab Middle Eastern vibe that honestly just put me to sleep. The ruins are especially bad with this, but the music in the first stage is alright. Aquastar's map theme is really nautical. I loved it, and the main theme is really sweet, as is the music on the islands. On to Neostar, it gave a sort of jungle vibe for its map theme, and the main theme is kind of just alright, but yeah, it's fine too. Shiver Star's map theme is ominous, like you're exploring a dead world, forgotten, which fits but is very depressing. The level theme has a cheerful intro but only gets more ominous halfway through. You also get a remix of Butter Building specifically in this level. I mentioned it earlier, but I just wanted to say it again because it sounds real nice. The music in the factory sections is heavily mechanical, using sound effects that seem to be a car starting up. It has a real ominous, depressing note. All that remains of mankind are mindless factories making products that nobody will ever enjoy. Ripple Star's map theme has a vibe of, one last challenge. The theme of the sewer slash catacombs is really a massive tonal shift. I mean, it just gets like creepy. It sounds like something you would hear out of a Resident Evil game. The main theme is not as bad and gives a sort of mobster feel as you get jumped by various enemy formations. The theme played when fighting Miracle Matter opens a lot like that of the normal boss theme, but rapidly changes into a sort of Eldritch Abomination theme that really shows its true threat. The ending theme of the game is alright. I haven't mentioned it till now, but the theme you hear when fighting Deity is completely different than what one would expect, but I like it. It has a sort of a hillbilly country vibe that is underrated in my view and I wish would come back again. The Dark Star music is not bad, but it cuts off before you can really enjoy it. But man, the pinnacle of the OST has to be the theme of the final boss Zero Two. It's such a haunting, depressing, almost, church cathedral slash biblical sounding sound that just has a haunting wailing subtext and frankly just sad, but not in a bad way, but like just it makes you think. Overall, the OST of this game is really good and a headbanger. Now that we've discussed the presentation, let us discuss the many foes that Kirby shall face on this journey, both returning and new. Alright, so starting with the normal returning copyability-less enemies, we got Bouncy, Bronto Burt, Gabon, Gordo, Mumby, Mariel the Spider, Glunk the Anemone, Mopo the White Sphere, Scarfy, Shotso the Canyon, Nuruff the Boar, Keke, the little witch girl that only appears in the background as a cameo. There's Pateron, the pterodactyl. Zebon, a green sphere that functions sort of like a cannon. Candy the crab also returns, but he has a far more demonic appearance in this game. In terms of new regular enemies, there's Brevolt, this invincible electric spark ghoul that moves up and down and can't be destroyed. Then there's a Bow, a black orb. Bonehead, which is a skull with bat wings. Catch, a little thing that just has a really adorable pair of maracas that is just so cute. In some cases, you can't destroy them, so they're just background characters. In that case, they're amazing. Then we got Bomber, which is this little guy who glides down with his purple and white umbrella. I want to take a note that this enemy is based off a earlier enemy, Sasuke from Kirby Dream Land 3, which I forgot to mention in my review of that game. Sorry, I try my best to do research, but sometimes stuff slips through the cracks. It was better in the anime episode appeared in the Happy New Year than in the game anyway. There is Drop, a weird water amoeba thing. Flopper, which is a red fish that can be seen flopping on the ground. Flora is a flower that floats down through the air. Fluther is a butterfly. Galama, a frog that will try to eat Kirby from a hole if Kirby passes by. Goblin is a cactus thing that bites at Kirby. Ice Cubed is a Cyclopean block that functions like Thromp from the Mario series. Mahal is a small mole guy that tosses bubbles at Kirby. Ignis is a large rock that falls on Kirby. Mawis is a blue teardrop-shaped thing that tries to eat Kirby with his big mouth if Kirby passes by. Melee is another weird mole thing that emerges from the ground and chases after Kirby. New is a ghostly critter that tosses fireballs at Kirby. Poopa is this limbless bug that will drop down from the ceiling on Kirby, exploding on contact, but can be easily defeated if it gets hit on either its body or the string it uses. NZ fills a role that Waddle Dee would in other games, as he's basically the Goomba. It does have a strange relationship with Dark Matter. Putt is a small worm-like guy that pushes boulders down a hill at Kirby. Sandman is this guy who rises out of the ground when Kirby arrives. Slushy is this jellyfish guy that sort of hangs out on top of frozen water and tries to bump Kirby. Shipper is a antlion type creature that will try and bite at Kirby as he passes by. Splitter is this log with spikes that rolls down hills at Kirby. Squibby is this strange angelic critter that's modeled after a type of sea slug that will attack Kirby by releasing tentacles at them. Then there is Yariko, a wild man that will throw spears at Kirby. And last but not least, we got a variant of the Shotso, the wall Shotso, which is an interesting concept that would sadly only show up in one level of this game and would be subsumed in the series by regular Shotsos that are just positioned in the background. It's kind of strange, really. Now let's go on to the enemies that give copy abilities, which are a little more interesting. Starting with the returning ones, we got Bobo, which gives burning, Chili that gives ice, Rocky that gives stone, Sir Kibble that gives cutter, Galbo that also gives burning, Magoo that also gives burning, Tick that gives needle, Sparky that gives Spark, Kapar the Kappa that gives Cutter, Propeller Bomb also returns, but this time gives Ice instead of giving no abilities, which it usually doesn't give any abilities at all, but that was kind of interesting. Going on to the new ability bearing foes, there is Pompeii, a little clam volcano looking guy that's named after that old Roman town that got destroyed by a volcano. It gives burning. Then there is Burnus, a fiery phoenix that drops fireballs on Kirby and gives burning. There is an icy equivalent called Frigus that poops out ice on Kirby and gives ice. It is also cool but much rarer. Punk is this armadillo guy who gives a needle. Rockin is a rocket that gives bomb. Sawyer is a freaking saw blade that gives cutter. Spark E is a diamond-shaped drone that fires a spark towards Kirby's last location. It's meant to be an allusion to Ramiel, the fifth angel from the anime series Evangelion, according to some sources, and gives spark. You got Scud, who is a toy rocket-looking dude that gives bomb. There is Turbite, a purple orb that is surrounded by metal prongs and will lunge at Kirby, emitting sparks. While doing so, it obviously gives sparks. The unfortunately named Pedo is a torpedo that shoots in a straight line quickly towards the young baby, which seems appropriate given the name, and it gives bomb. Zeus is a little yellow guy that hovers over Kirby and throws lightning at him, and is inspired by the Greek god of lightning, Zeus. It gives spark, obviously. Blowfish is a pufferfish that gives bomb. Plug is a waddling spark plug that gives spark. Cairn is a pile of rocks that gives stone, and is inspired by real-life rock piles made by old people called cairns. Then there is Imp, who is a penguin that gives ice and is named after the emperor penguin, the large species of penguin. Fishbone is a fish skeleton that shoots projectiles at Kirby and gives the cutter ability. Then there is Ghost Knight, which is this round ghost cyclops blob that will try and thrust its lance at Kirby and gives the needle ability. Hack is a hatchet that has a pair of feet and tries to smash itself at Kirby. It honestly gives stone, which is a bit weird. Last but not least, we got Cacti, a cactus that will give the needle ability and will roll back and forth once Kirby approaches it. Overall, the new guys, some are a bit forgettable, but others are kind of interesting and I wish they'd come back. Now let's go to the mini-bosses, and man, these are very much a mixed bag. So, World 1 Popstar really gives somewhat of a false impression. There is a notable mini-boss in each level. Waddle Doo, which strangely doesn't use any of his I-beam attacks that he's so well known for, instead will try and tackle Kirby in two different speeds, as well as physically leap on Kirby, all of which generate stars that can be sucked up and spat back out at him. He's very easy, all things considered. His attacks are well, choreographed, and he's just kind of pathetic. But he's still fun due to the visual design. Then we got Adeline, who functions much like Ado in Dreamland 3 by painting a series of foes in a sort of very neat art style that is very similar to Dreamland 3, which is a cool touch. First is an NZ. Then there is Bronto Burt. Next, there's a Mario, then a Mummy, all of which can be inhaled and beaten in one hit. Which is odd, since mummies are some of the few critters that Kirby can't inhale, for that matter, even later in the game, so that's kind of interesting. Then she paints what I can only describe as a weird mass of pixels. It's kind of funny to think of what could it be, but anyway, it can be beaten in one hit. The last two enemies are more complex. First is Ice Dragon, who functions like he did in previous games, and he will either release an ice block, which he will then tail whip at Kirby, and will also try and leap at him. It's relatively easy, but not something that's unmemorable. Like, I remember this. Last but not least, she paints the true form of dark matter from the last two games. It will shoot out a smaller form of itself at Kirby, and will occasionally swoop at him, which is very fun. After his defeat, Adeline gets off the stump and swings her paintbrush at Kirby, but she's pathetic, and even an air bullet can beat her in one hit. Honestly, this is a really fun encounter. Even if it's not that much harder, it's just neat to see this concept again, and frankly, it was fun to see the art style used. Next, we got King Deity, who is basically a fight like he did in the last game, but with much less health. The first phase has him on the ground, who will try to suck up Kirby with black clouds emanating from his mouth. He'll also try and hit Kirby with his hammer, which generates a pretty big explosion, and will also try and hop on Kirby. The second phase sees him start floating around in the sky. His belly will open up like the Thing movie, and either bite at Kirby or reveal an eye that will shoot out black orbs at Kirby, which can be sucked up and spat out back at him. It's fun and relatively easy, but I still find it a very enjoyable encounter. Sadly, all the remaining mid-bosses are just larger versions of previous enemies that really put no effort in fighting. There's a big NZ, big Bouncy, big Cacti, big Fishbone, a big Sparky, big Tick, big Canny, big Kapar, big Galbo, big Chili, big Nopu, big Pupa, big Blowfish, Big Burnus, and Big Sawyer. There's really nothing to say about these guys, but luckily the true bosses that we will be going over now are far more interesting, with 2 returning and 5 completely new. The first boss is none other than Wispy Woods, who is fought in a circular arena. The first phase has 3 of his children called Wispy Woods Juniors that will jump around but can be easily defeated by spitting out apples, which Wispy releases onto Kirby. The second phase sees Wispy rightfully angry that you killed his children, and will get much more aggressive and will toss out more apples, shoot out air bullets, and send out roots to try and impale you. Overall, it's a really good first boss for the game and a return of a classic foe. The second boss is against Pix, an ancient security system which is inspired by the RGB color model in computers, with 3 energy constructs that are octahedrons in blue, red, and green. There are 2 phases to this fight. The first takes place in a circular arena as it rises up the shaft in the pyramid center. In this phase, he's invisible and you have to avoid his attacks, which include either 1, 2, or 3 of the, energy things shooting out blades and attacking Kirby. The second phase occurs when they reach the top of the shaft, and you can actually damage them now. You see, there will be these colored objects that will appear and can be sucked up and spat out at them. Matching the color of the projectile with the specific individual octahedron leads to double damage. Pix will attack Kirby by either dropping bombs on Kirby, which can't be inhaled, as well as bunch together into a ring and fly around on the arena, trying to hit Kirby. Once one is disabled, they take on a wireframe appearance and can no longer drop bombs or ram Kirby. Honestly, it's another good boss. Not that much harder than Wispy, but it is fun. It has a very alien design to it. Like, it looks like something that doesn't really belong. The third boss is another returning one, that being Acro, which is an orca whose name is spelled backwards, get it? Simple design and name aside, it functions a lot like the fight in Kirby's Dream Land 3, except now the first phase is also underwater. Speaking of, the first phase has him spit out various enemies and projectiles, including fish bones and Gordos, while backing away from Kirby. He will also do body slams or charges to attack. The second phase sees him and Kirby have to swim up a narrow vertical tunnel while avoiding attacks which are harder due to the narrow room. He'll shoot pedos at Kirby or charge him. It's honestly a fun encounter and legitimately the first really challenging one, though it's actually still pretty easy because it's Kirby, but still. It's also neat to see a classic foe return, as this would be the last time he serves as a boss. The fourth boss is Magman, which is a giant lava blob guy. Really simple design, who is easier than Acro in my honest opinion. The first phase sees him in the background where he uses lava pillars to attack Kirby, which can then be damaged. The second phase sees Magman appear in the foreground and chase after Kirby. And he'll attack Kirby by, summoning Burnizes, blowing, fire blasts out of his mouth at Kirby, and summoning rocks to fall on him. It's honestly a fine encounter, but nothing really notable, really. It has a relatively boring design, and the fight is, pretty easy, all things considered. The fifth boss is the exact opposite, that being HRH, a giant robot with a sort of Patrick build with a mix of a Gundam look. And he has a very interesting fight as the Guardian of Shiver Star. He will first, in his first phase, utilize his wings as arms to attack Kirby, and will also shoot out sweeping laser beams and missiles that Kirby can suck up and spit out at him or get bomb. The second phase sees him become HRE, shifting to a form that more sort of looks like a ship or an animal, kind of reminds me of a crawfish. It will chase Kirby along the platform while firing rockets and trying to pinch him with his claws. You actually kind of have a time limit as the platforms do end after a point, but it's so generous you actively have to try to lose. Honestly, I love this boss fight. It has a really impressive feeling due to the size. It has multiple phases that are cool, and I just love it. And would actually go on to inspire several future bosses in the series. Specifically, HRD3 from Return to Dreamland. The fake final boss, Miracle Matter, is honestly a very interesting design. It sort of looks like a Dungeons and Dragons dice possessed by Sauron. It has a very interesting gimmick with a form for each of the 7 base abilities, which can only be harmed by the ability it represents. The burn form has it become a burning ball of fire that will shoot flame pillars at Kirby, which leave behind a glob of fire that can be inhaled and spat out at him, or give you the burning ability. The cutter form has it become a set of green boomerangs that honestly look like the fishbone enemy, which will cycle around the arena trying to hit Kirby. The last green boomerang can be inhaled and spat back out at it. The ice form has it become an ice cube that floats around the arena and ejects a set of revolving icicles that can be sucked up and spat back out at it. The Nita form has it become a sort of sundial thing that will extend its spines at Kirby, which leave behind their ends that Kirby can suck up and spit out. The spark form is a sparkling ball of light that shoots out lasers that will reflect off it and slowly slow down, allowing Kirby to suck them up and spit it back out at them. The stone form is a large brown boulder that will eject rocks from it that will then fall down on Kirby, which can then be sucked up and spat out at him. Last and strangest is the bomb form, which are like bubbles. By the way, you can get copy abilities from all these forms by inhaling their, item, which, by the way, are randomly chosen. It doesn't have a strict order in which of these forms it goes through, but it's not worth it. Spitting projectiles at them is the best option, and frankly, overall, this is a fun, if a bit gimmicky fight, but it is nothing compared to the true final boss, 02. So this thing is genuinely creepy. Like, it starts out with a very off-putting smile before the bloodshot eye is shown, and yes, it is bloodshot, as it literally bleeds each time you hit it, which made future re-releases of this game have to have a higher age rating because of it. It's heavily implied due to the angelic symbolism, as well as bandages and wings and halo, that it is a resurrected Zero, though that's never outright confirmed. Speaking of that, after shooting his eye enough, he will flail in pain, showing his wings, which can be damaged, allowing for an easier fight, or the halo. 10 hits are needed to destroy the halo, which then reveals his true weak point, which is this green cactus sticking out of his butt. I don't understand what that is about. Anyway, after enough damage, it blows up alongside 02, Dark Star, as we see the end of the Dark Matter's direct involvement in the series, though it is implied in later games that it has more of an influence. Overall, this is an amazing final boss to this game and the Dark Matter trilogy. Now let us go to the completion requirements and my final thoughts on this game. Alright, so in terms of completion requirements, it's actually fairly lax compared to earlier games. Upon defeating Miracle Matter, the sound test is unlocked. In order to get 100% completion, though, all you gotta do is get all of the crystal shards. There are 3 in each stage, and 1 in each boss, as stated earlier, and getting them can vary from very easy to extremely annoying. One thing I would advise is that oftentimes the objects blocking the crystal shards bear the color of the abilities required to get it. Also, remember that Rick's form can climb walls. You'll need that for one. And also remember that the drill combo ability that I discussed way back then can go through walls. You'll need to remember those 2 things. Upon getting all of the shards, one unlocks the boss battle mode and the theater, where you can rewatch the cutscenes of the game as many times as you want. And that's it. Oh, there are other things that the Kirby community often think are mandatory, like beating every difficulty of the 3 minigames, beating the boss rush mode with no damage, which gets a special screen if you do that, and as well as collecting all of the enemy info cards. Now, I didn't really talk about these earlier as it didn't really fit in the script anywhere, but at the end of every stage, you can participate in a minigame where you can either get food, extra lives, or frankly, more importantly, these cards. There are 81 in total, and honestly don't serve much purpose. Say, unlike, Paper Mario or Pikmin, where there's, cool trivia you can read, here you just get a picture of the foe and what ability they give, if they give one at all. They're cool, but don't feel like you have to go and get them all if you don't want to. I remember doing it once, and it's very obnoxious because you have to retry level if you miss the card. Luckily, you can already tell if you're going to get a new one or a old one, depending on Kirby's expression when you hit it. But yeah, you can get them all if you want, but don't feel like you have to. Let's just say this is a lot more generous than other Kirby games going forwards. I'll just put it that way. Overall, as a standalone game, this is a really fun experience. It's cool to experiment with the various copy ability combos as you go through this game. It has a great story, aided by amazing presentation, even for the time, and still looks good, honestly. Now, taking a broader look at this game as part of the Dark Matter trilogy, a lot of people like to accuse these 3 games directed by the mysterious Shinichi Shinamura as just repeating the same thing. But I think that misunderstands both the creative process and the design decisions here. Yes, they do share aspects like the ability combo system, but really, I think that's just a different, equally valid attempt to add nuance to the one-button press abilities of the original Kirby's Adventure. They're sort of 2 different, branches from the same ancestry, you could say. And it's, admittedly, in some cases, not as fun as, Superstar's approach, as some of the combos are kind of lame. But if anything, I think that they are their most refined here compared to the previous 2, as Kirby can do it without animal friends. And I'd love to see this concept revisited in a proper way in the future. Plus, these games are not identical to each other in, terms of plot, graphic, and gameplay design decisions. They grow on each other rather than, just do the same thing. And honestly, it makes sense why they would do that. I mean, after all, why would you completely abandon everything in a previous game? I mean, they do share similarities like dark matter, the animal friends, and yes, their gameplay has been forgotten over time in favor of Kirby Superstar, more nuanced copyability movesets, but I would say that it arguably established more of the series' lore and setting. Whether you consider one of those more important, I'll leave for you to decide. This game also acts as the end of the Kirby Classic era, or as it's known, the Kirby Golden Age. How was this period in Kirby's franchise history? Well, having played all of them, I must say, actually, yeah, they're all pretty good and have high quality. Especially if you go into the older games with their archaic standards in mind. As I mean, obviously, the original Dreamland not as refined as some of the later games, lacks copy abilities, but I still think that they're pretty good. Some of the spin-offs are honestly forgettable, mostly due to it being very hard to play them at all. But all the mainline games of this time are worth playing. I mean, even if some of them are archaic, usually they're short enough that you don't waste too much time. And Kirby 64 and the Crystal Shards is no exception. And in many ways, it's in some ways the pinnacle of this time period, as it represents both some, more refinements from later games while also maintaining some of the curiosities of the older time. And there are several ways to play it if you want to. First, of course, there's the OG Nintendo 64 release. Then there was the re-release for the Wii Virtual Console, first in North America on February 25th, 2008, then in EU and Australia on March 7th, 2008, in Japan on April 15th, 2008, and lastly in South Korea on September 16th, 2008. Next was the re-release in Kirby's Dream Collection Special Edition in 2012. Then there was the re-release for the Wii U Virtual Console, first in the EU on June 25th, 2015, then in Australia on June 26th, 2015, then in North America on July 30th, 2015, and lastly in Japan on August 19th, 2015. And most recently there was the re-release on the Nintendo 64 and Nintendo Switch Online service worldwide on May 20, 2022. Regardless of how you play it, you were in for quite the fun experience, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is either a Kirby fan or not. Anyway, I'm the Dark Master. If you like this video, like it, but if you love it, consider subscribing, and have a wonderful day.